Hi, good evening, and welcome to another meeting of DiEM25's Coordinating Collective. Well, when we thought that things are going well, probably because the weather was nice, the weather is bad again, and the news from the world are not better. We have elections in United States, which are always an event that affects the whole world, and the current events in France and in Austria and so on. So we should probably start with the US elections. Do we have hands for this topic?
Yeah, I can start.
Please, Yanis, go on.
Well, thank you, Ivana. Thank you, comrades, again. Thank you, everyone. I'll be very succinct regarding my personal assessment of what's going on. It's the worst possible outcome, the worst of the worst, far worse than Trump just winning. And why am I saying that? A number of reasons. I'll start with the obvious one. Following the usurpation of Bernie Sanders' campaign, following yet another successful attempt by the establishment of the Democratic Party to prevent Bernie Sanders, the only candidate who could actually stand up against Trumpism, from becoming the candidate of the Democratic Party in this election. Bernie's team worked diligently to influence the Biden team and particularly its economic policy. Comrades of ours, including Stephanie Kelton, who would have been the Treasury Secretary had Bernie Sanders become the President of the United States, worked very hard to shift the Biden team towards a Green New Deal. It was the condition that Bernie Sanders set before throwing his lot and the Sanders political revolution movement behind Biden. The two teams worked well together, from what I hear, and Biden was forced by this to accept a Green New Deal that was quite substantive. It was not what we would have liked, but it was not insignificant either. And as a result, Bernie Sanders and his supporters threw their lot behind Biden. The election result, which is shaping up as a very narrow electoral college victory for Biden, but a fantastic result for Trumpism, especially having held the Senate. The fact that now the Republicans are holding the Senate and they are becoming far more Trumpian than they were even during the last 4 years liberates Biden from any commitment to the economic policies agreed to with the Bernie Sanders team. We're going to have a Biden president who is no longer bound to the Green New Deal because of the loss of the Senate, who never wanted it in the first place, but who might have been pushed to adopt it had the Democrats won the Senate. So he doesn't want the Green New Deal. He has a fantastic excuse for liberating himself from it. Besides that, what we're now going to see is a much stronger Trumpist, racist, nationalist, ultra-nationalist, Republican right, Trumpian right, who now feel that they've been robbed. I'm not saying that they were robbed, but the sentiment is spreading like a wildfire amongst them, therefore unifying them and radicalizing them, holding the Senate at the same time, having succeeded in securing almost complete monopoly over the Republican Party, while on the other side, our side of politics, the Bernie Sanders movement, the Democratic Socialists, the progressives, the Rainbow Coalition, what we used to call, now we are in an impossible situation of having to defend a president that is indefensible. A president who is neither interested nor willing to implement the policies of the left. By, however, having thrown our lot into the victory, the Electoral College victory of Biden, right? We will be, our comrades in the United States, will have to defend that president because they helped elect him. That is going to lead to the de-radicalization of the left. It's going to effectively return the Black Lives Movement, the Bernie Sanders political revolution back to the margins, back into their homes. It will delegitimize and de-radicalize the left. This is why I'm claiming that if you, in addition to this, place into the picture the fact that now we have the neocons back in the Pentagon and in the State Department, because the neocons supported Biden, and therefore we have a clear and present danger to world peace, which at least we didn't have with Trump. This is the worst possible outcome for the United States, for progressives in the United States. The only good thing, the silver lining, is that Trump is not going to be in the White House to lead the world's, the nationalist international, the Bolsonaros, the Modis, the Farages, the Le Pens, and so on, from within the White House. But it's a very thin silver lining because Trumpism is still going to be prevalent. And we are facing, if anything, an intensification of that brand of ultra-right-wing politics.
Yeah, thank you, Yanis. Luis?
Thanks, Ivana. I partially agree with you, Yanis. I explained to you why partially. In the short term, it looks horrible because Trump remains the president until January. So we're looking at a very bad winter in the midst of COVID. The potential legal challenges to the election that he might throw will hurt the democratic institutions in the US and, and all of that. So short term is worse, I think. However, there's one point that we Europeans and Americans, of course, the progressive Americans, continue to ignore in my view. And it's similar to what happened in Brexit. We continue to treat the electors as crazies. And so when you speak about the horrible situation in which progressives are in the midst of having to support a president that we don't want, I think that the challenge is to look at this as a symptom and try to get those people back. It is true, Bolsonaro, Brexit, Trump, the others are at fault. He's defending our interests vis-a-vis China and all of these things. That convince people that populist, empty, racist speech. We need to ask ourselves what we can do because we haven't done anything. We have shattered the left effectively. And so I think that we need to be very critical as to what we can do, how we can add value and bring those people back because they're not crazies. And to insist on that kind of framing will do even worse. That's my view.
Yes, I would like to give the floor to Srečko next, but to underline what you just said, what DiEM can do about that, what we can do to help the progressives. Srečko.
Yeah, thanks, Ivana, but I can see Claudia also raised her hand, and since two men have already spoken, I would pass my floor to Claudia and speak after Claudia.
Thank you, Srečko, but I don't have any idea about how we as DiEM can help at that moment. But the only thing I see for this case, if Biden would win, actually, would bring back freedom of press. Because this is one thing I found in the last days, it was really difficult. And perhaps this can make a change if Biden wins and the Democrats are more in favor of. And perhaps this can also bring freedom of press as related to Julian Assange. And that brings me to the idea, what can we do regarding promoting our dear comrade Julian to Biden? Perhaps is this something we can do if he's elected then? So to make a change for us and for him.
Srečko?
After Yanis's speech and also what Claudia said, first maybe to Claudia, I think Biden is much worse than Trump, actually, ironically, but darkly speaking, when it comes to the case of Julian Assange. If we remember what Biden was saying about WikiLeaks and so on, which doesn't mean we shouldn't insist on the case as well, because he will obviously have a big influence on it. Regarding what Yanis said, I also partially agree. With most, I agree, but I'm not completely sure whether it will really de-radicalize the left. Because what I can see is that in the last years, precisely because of Trump, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if Hillary was in power, that the left got radicalized. You had the Debt Collective, you had Sunrise Movement, AOC, the Courageous Congresswoman, and so on. And luckily, AOC and her gang are back to the Congress. So I think what we have to do is to remember what Tony Benn famously said, and what Yanis, you also love to repeat on many occasions, which is that there is no final victory and that there is no final defeat. Of course, we are coming much closer to the final defeat, which is called mass extinction. And after that, no struggle will make any sense anymore. So we have to struggle until extinction. But I think we also have to take into account the long-term perspective, where perhaps in 4 years, AOC and the Young Democrats will be closer to power. But what we have to remember all the time, and I think this election and all this counting and voting and everything what's happening now in the media and so on reminds us of that, is also that we have to build spaces of autonomy outside of representative democracy. I know this sounds a bit anarchist, but I'm more and more sure into that we cannot just rely on electoral politics and the messiah who will come or not come and so on, especially seeing what you, Yanis, correctly said, in which way they undermined, and not only undermined, stopped Bernie Sanders to become the candidate. So I think at the same time, I think instead of de-radicalization, it might also lead to actually to the opposite, to the radicalization of the left among some of the movements, especially the youngsters who are part of these movements or who are so disappointed by the Democratic Party. So I wouldn't say it's so dark. Maybe this is a chance also to radicalize the left again and to work towards a long-term project which wouldn't find ourselves in this complex situation which you, Yanis, described well, that we are kind of forced to support Biden and so on. Yeah, so that's my view.
I would like to give the floor to Yanis now to respond to some of these questions. And then Yanis, maybe you can take it forward to Labour Party, which is not very different from what we are talking about right now.
Thank you, Vanna. Srečko, there is no such thing as a final defeat, but there is such a thing as a major blow. And what I was saying, of course, we will always pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and continue. But this is a major blow. Make no mistake. The left has suffered a major defeat. And it will be de-radicalized, at least in the next couple of years. Let me read to you, comrades, a message I got from a person you all know very well, a comrade from Texas, a friend of mine, Jamie Galbraith, somebody who is, has been part and parcel of DiEM25 from day one. He just sent me this morning, not just this morning, he sent me, must have been late at night for him, the following, which resonates with the position I put forward. He says, Yanis, I'm quite convinced. Now that comes from a diehard left Democrat. I'm quite convinced that it will be better now if Trump wins, forcing a renewal of the Democrats and the likely collapse of the Republicans in 2 and 4 years. As things look this morning, the reverse will happen. Biden will get the blame for the long slump to come, economic slump, the Great Depression that's coming, and be unable as well as unwilling to do anything about it. And those of us who supported Biden will share the blame for the Great Depression that will have the Democrats' name all over it. But at least Pompeo will be gone until he returns as a presidential contender in 2024. That, I think, covers my view. There is no doubt that, take Alexandria, you mentioned AOC, right? She supported Biden. She's going to share the blame for the extreme impoverishment of the working class that's coming under a government that she supported. This is not good for Alexandria. Even if she is the internal opposition to Biden, it is clipping her wings. It is doing a lot of damage to the left in the United States. Now, one last thing. There's nothing we can do as DiEM. I mean, we're hardly substantial enough within the European Union. We are trying to be. What we can do through the Progressive International, support our comrades, but what I think is essential for DiEM to do is ask ourselves the question, what does this mean for the European Union? What does it mean for European politics? A couple of quick takeaways, if I may, before shifting to the UK Labour Party. First, the liberal establishment in the European Union is proving its complete inanity, idiocy. For months now, they were banking on a clean sweep, a landslide by Biden, for 3 reasons. First, they were hoping that the aberration that was Trump will go, and then they can rely on the United States defense umbrella to defend the European Union militarily. That is going to be proven to be just another version of wishful thinking. Nothing is going to change, especially with the Senate remaining in the hands of Trump. The second piece of wishful thinking on behalf of the European liberal establishment is that there is going to be some kind of substantial intervention regarding climate change, Paris Accords, and so on. Biden is going to bring the United States back to the Paris Accords, but without any substantive change in policies. Shale gas, LNG, these are all the policies of Biden just as much as they were the policies of Trump. And when it comes to world peace, Biden, as I mentioned that before, has a neocons within him. The European Union's half-hearted opposition to American expansionism is going to become even less impressive now that the neocons are back in the Pentagon and in the State Department. The most significant part is, by the way, George is trying to get in. Somebody should let him in. The greatest threat we are facing in the European Union as a result of what's happening in the States is that the sense of outrage amongst the ultra-right that they've been robbed of the White House, which already, I saw today in Greece's parliament, right-wingers coming out with rage that democracy was subverted by the Democrats. We saw this in Greece's parliament today. Imagine the combination of this and the libertarian opposition to lockdown that we see in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and elsewhere, together with this hardening of the ultra-right in the United States, is going to create more of this spiral of mutual reinforcement between the liberal establishment, the Macrons of the world, and the Le Pens of the world. Going very briefly to the UK Labour situation. The response by Jeremy Corbyn to his suspension from the UK Labour Party has been understandable, but very disheartening. Effectively, Jeremy and other comrades are pleading for reinstatement when the leadership of the Labour Party is making a very clear break, a very clear move to split the party and effectively to ban radical voices from within the Labour Party. Let me remind you that our comrade John McDonnell was threatened with expulsion from the Labour Party. The shadow chancellor, until a few months ago, was threatened with expulsion from the Labour Party because he was going to support and sign some of the statements of the Progressive International to which he belongs. Now, that is what a leadership does when it wants to purge a party. And those who are about to be purged are not going to be defended adequately by pleas for leniency. DiEM will be taking steps in creating a forum in the United Kingdom. As we said last week, we're not ready yet to make any announcements, but we are going to be taking steps to create a space where progressives from the Labour Party, from the Green Party, from other parties, from no parties, can get together to speak, to talk to one another in the only place which they can actually do this, which is DiEM, because we are trusted by all different sides to provide the infrastructure for such a discussion. We will be playing such a role. But of course, it is for them to decide how they want to proceed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanis. I don't see any hands. Would anybody like to comment on Labour Party situation, or we can close this topic and move on to anybody? No? Moving on to issues of the crisis of French secularism. Rosemary?
Yes, I just thought it was worth noting that we've been publishing sort of letters signed by major scholars throughout the world in protest at the impact of Macron's response to the horrible assassination of the school teacher, Samuel Paty, which seems to have ramped up what was already quite a program for tightening a clampdown on Muslims in France under the heading of tackling separatism. They're very concerned that precisely this moves Macron further towards Le Pen, and that this jeopardizes all sorts of important aspects of French democracy, but including and beginning in, importantly with the freedom of speech in academia. The co-signatories are all very concerned, particularly about the teaching of anti-racism and decoloniality studies in France. And I just think that this is something that we need to discuss. Of course, it's not confined to France, this general tendency to take the very confusing category of political Islam in order to ramp up internal divisions in this very toxic period. I feel I ought to say something about our proposals to open up a progressive space in the UK. Broadly speaking, I think this picks up on the point that Srečko was making earlier. What is the future for electoral politics? What is the future for politics outside electoral politics in the whole of Europe? I do think this is something that progressives need to talk about now. It doesn't mean that we will be making recommendations about when to be electoral, when not to be electoral, but it does mean that we need much better cooperation between the forces that are engaged in all these activities.
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. Anybody else who would like to comment? Okay, Now, moving on, we have another two short topics. One is an update from Juliana about DSE coordination.
Yes, thank you. It's really just a quick update at this point. I've sent an email last week, Sunday, or this week, yeah, last week, Sunday, to the coordinators with a schedule for 3 calls this year, 1 in November and 2 in December, so everyone can attend. To have an overview of the situation, how are the coordinators working, what's their struggles. So I thought the best thing is to have calls with them. And I hope that many coordinators will attend. So far, I think only 4 have signed for the calls, but I will remind them and I think I will get some more. Then we have a new email address, which is dsc@diem25.org. where DSC members and coordinators can send their request, which is specifically for DSC work if they have any questions. And also we will have our own DiEM25 mailing list for the coordinators, and I want to keep them up to date about things that are happening in DiEM. So I want to shortly ask you if anything is up which the DSC coordinators should be informed about, that you just sent me a quick email if you have something the DSC coordinators should be updated about. So I will, I think, send an email occasionally to you to ask for any updates if something is important. But yeah, this is how far I've come with the coordination. So this year I will be concentrating on gathering information from the DSC coordinators, so I can know better how to help them in the future. Yes.
Thanks, Juliana. And I think that's one of our major steps towards better communication with our members, along with the country coordination calls that we are having. Yeah, we will be coming back with updates. I forgot Vienna, so we will go back to Srećko for that topic now.
Yes, sure. I just wanted to quickly, first of all, declare my solidarity to everyone who was hurt in any way, even psychologically, during the events which happened in Vienna. As you know, DiEM25 is also present in Austria. We have our dear members in Austria. I happened to be stuck there, as you know, during the lockdown in Vienna, and I have really nice memories of that beautiful city. What happened on Monday, I think, can be put also in the context of what Rosemary said, because some interesting things happened. I mean, first, the facts, it's that unfortunately 4 people died, more than 20 people are injured. There was shooting on 6 locations in Innenstadt of Vienna by what they say now is a lone gunman. ISIL claimed responsibility. We don't know yet whether that's true or not, but what happened is really a horrific event which happened the night before the lockdown, while all the Viennese were outside in bars and so on, and the terrorist, who is 20 years old, basically shot at the restaurants and people outside. But some interesting things happen, which I think invite us to think about it in the future, because these kind of events might be coming back to Europe in a bigger number. I think what was really beautiful at one hand was the solidarity shown by people living in Vienna, from the 2 Turks, young Turks, who jumped in to rescue a woman and an injured policeman, to the people who were offering their apartments to strangers and so on. So you had something which I think can be put into the context of the document Simona and Rosemary are preparing, which is more focused on local community. You know, what in this kind of situation of not only COVID crisis, but terrorism, the local community can do in order to help. But what also happened, which brings me back to Rosemary, is that because I was following in the same way we are all following the US elections now, we were following in the media, and two things happened, which I think are very warning. One is, which brings me back to Rosemary, which is that Emmanuel Macron was one of the first European leaders to not only show his support to the Austrians, but was already speaking about the enemy, even if the Austrian police still didn't say anything, and the Minister of Interior Affairs also didn't say anything about the attacker. They didn't say yet whether he was Macedonian, whether he was Muslim, and so on. But Macron obviously had some information, or used the situation to weaponize the situation even more. So what I think we are coming back to some sort of clash of civilization discourse again in Europe, and that's very dangerous. And the other thing which might interest Claudia, and I think Claudia was following it well, is how the so-called boulevard media, this is a term which in our German friends use, boulevard media was actually showing the killings live. So we really came to this kind of situation where you have, you know, bloody murder inside of social media and so on. And I think that's something we have to think about, the role of media and in which way they are contributing actually to terror. So yeah, I'll end up with that. I know that the international DSC of DiEM, I hope, I heard it somewhere that they are preparing a statement on Vienna, and I think we all have to to look very closely what's happening in Austria these days.
Yes, thanks, Rechko. Simona?
After 2015 terrorist attacks, there were demonstrations in Italy and in Bologna too, of Muslims living in Italy, who said these terrorist attacks are against us, first of all. They are made to hinder our integration, our possibility to live in Europe in the peaceful and constructive way we want. So I think our solidarity should go to Muslims living in Europe more than to anybody else.
If I can just add something very quickly, I think Simona is completely right. What the situation in Vienna makes a bit specific, it's that it's not just you know, the Muslim Turkish minority. Vienna is very often in ex-Yugoslavia considered as the second biggest Yugoslav city when it comes to the number of Croats, Serbs, Macedonians, Albanians, and so on, who are in Vienna. So I think what is new here is that we are adding a new population. I mean, a new, which is not the case in France or in Germany, where it's mainly Turkish minority or refugees or homegrown terrorism connected to a radicalized version of Islam. But here in this case, I think even the Yugo community, to put it like that, might be targeted and might be the victims precisely of this, which I think is a good point, that the effects of this terror actually hurt those who want to integrate, those who actually want to live peacefully in these kind of cities. Yeah.
Beral?
Yes, because you mentioned the millions of Turkish people living in European Union countries. I know that in Germany there is also a big problem of this kind of not terrorist attacks, but some kind of groups of very religious, radical religious people against all the order as order in Germany. AKP party is interfering into the mosque structure in Germany, and they, for example, they are documenting imams, and the imams are coming from Turkey, and they are highly politicized, and they are trying to gain the votes of millions of Turks for AKP party during the elections. They make big demonstrations in the mosques. So it is dangerous. 2016, I was in Berlin and with very high level politicians in a meeting. So I recommended them not to allow imams coming from Turkey, but only following imams who are already Turkish German citizens. So that was my recommendation.
Thank you, Beral, and I think that's a very valuable point of view, not when we are talking about Islam and Muslims, but any secular country which is declaring to be secular but has a huge influence of church, which is basically politicized and manipulating people, not in the name of the government, but like they are working hand in hand. So we also need to be careful about this politicization of religion and using people who don't have enough knowledge again to divide and conquer, because that's what it comes down to, unfortunately. Anyone else? Okay, so we are coming to an end of this coordinating collectives meeting with one short announcement that we have launched the open call for Green New Deal campaign coordinator and DiEM25 voice coordinator. We will close the applications on 15th of November. So we are inviting you to check your inboxes or spam boxes and apply for one of these two. And we are also announcing that next week we will have an open call for an intern, which will have to be based in Brussels. This will be all from us for tonight. Take care, stay safe. Carpe diem.